Hey guys, welcome back to more neighbor stories. In this video, an entitled Karen set my Tesla on fire claiming that electric vehicles are forbidden in her neighborhood. Let's dive right into the story. If someone had told me last year that I would have just gone through one of the most frightening and nightmarish situations of my life, all because my neighbor would escalate a situation that had absolutely nothing to do with her to the level where I could have lost my home or been killed, I might not have believed it. Yet here I am writing this a few months after the incident. My name is Monica and I've been a successful entrepreneur with my own business for several years now. It didn't start off as an easy journey, but now I have a great home decor company with several employees. Because of all the hours and hard work that has to go into building my company and the sacrifices I needed to make, I now believe in rewarding myself when I can. I'm a single woman without any children. My personal relationship sort of took a backseat to the company I was building. Now that I'm established and have employees who are great, I can afford a little more time for my own interests. I've decided that I want to do some more exploring of the cities around me, seeing new restaurants, nightlife, art galleries and other cultural venues. So I decided what better things to do than purchase myself my dream car for my adventures. I chose a Tesla Model S. It is a slick white car that I make sure to have washed whenever it gets even the slightest bit dirty. I live in an upscale, quiet suburban neighborhood and there are a lot of people in different points of their lives who live here, from young families to retired couples. I don't know a lot of my neighbors as I've pretty much kept to myself other than occasionally meeting someone at the cafe, down the street or the mailbox, but the majority of people seem friendly. So there is Karen who lives next door and she seems to have a bit of a reputation for liking to be difficult. She complained that the purple bushes I planted near my fence were too bright and that it detracted from the neighborhood aesthetic. I mostly brushed that off, had not seen any regulations to go with our gardens, and it wasn't up to Karen to decide what plants I grew in my yard. I had noticed that all of her plants were pale colors, but I firmly believe in the concept of to each their own unless it affects public safety. Since I'd gotten my Tesla, it meant that I needed to get a charger installed in my garage. I took the time to research the one that I needed. I hired professionals to put it in so that everything would be safe and up to code. The evening after it was installed, I was sitting in my living room reading a new paperback that I had picked up at a bookstore across from a home decor boutique where I had dropped off an order a few weeks before, and there was a loud, furious knock on my door. I got up to see what was happening. By the intensity, I was expecting something to be urgent, but instead it was Karen. "What is that thing you got added to your garage this afternoon?" demanded Karen without even saying hello. "Well, it's the charger for my car, it's electric," I replied. "It's against city code," said Karen. "Huh? Lots of people have electric cars now," I replied. "It's the way of the future." "It is not safe," said Karen. "Give me a minute to put on my shoes and I can show you all its safety features," I answered. "I'm not interested in your excuses," said Karen. "You need to get rid of that thing right now. And why did you choose such a ridiculous vehicle anyway? You are ruining the neighborhood aesthetic once again." "I'm not," I replied, "and I can have whatever car I want. I don't need anyone's permission when it comes to choosing my vehicle. It's not causing anyone harm." "You could end up burning down the entire neighborhood with that thing," said Karen. "All it would take would be for it to catch fire and then the fire spread to the fence and then to my home." "The charger won't catch fire," I replied. "They have extensive safety features and have been rigorously tested. Your modification to the garage is against code and it could affect property values," said Karen. "If anything, it will make the value go up by having it, because there's a chance if I someday decide to sell my home, the next person who moves in will have an electric vehicle too," I answered. I tried to tell Karen more about the safety features and to come and see it with me. I did not know her well and was trying to determine if it was just ignorance or plain fear of the unknown that had her acting the way she did. I'd never seen a lot of people visiting Karen's place. She also didn't have any children or a husband to my knowledge. I suppose that maybe she lacked fulfillment. I had my company and my career to sustain me, and now my new car and my plans for my adventure, but what did Karen have? Probably the amazing, iconic Karen haircut. But anyway, "You do know that electric vehicles are forbidden, right?" said Karen. "It's the neighborhood by law." "If there was ever such a bylaw," I replied, "it is past dated." "Your charger thingy is not safe," said Karen. "Get it out of our neighborhood." "I have the manual," I said. "I can photocopy some pages for you if you would like to look into it further. Maybe you will even want to go electric for your next vehicle." "Never," said Karen. "And if you don't have that charger, whatever you call it, taken out, I will be forced to take matters into my own hands." "That is a death trap." "I've tried to reason with you," I answered, "but you're blowing this whole situation out of proportion. If it would make you feel better, I can get a note of authorization from the city clerk tomorrow and a letter from my electrician and the manufacturer of the level 2 charger for you. You're stalling, said Karen. You have an hour to get rid of it or else I will see to it that you do. Please, Karen, I answered. There's no need to involve the authorities or anyone. And by the way, guys, at this point I would have already called the cops on Karen. She's clearly making threats and trying to intimidate OP. My car charger is not going to bring you any harm. Maybe I can get you a cup of tea and we can chat. Don't toss your hospitality in my face and think that it will get me to change my mind, said Karen, turning around and marching back towards her home. While shaken, I returned to my book. I didn't actually think that she would do anything. After all, my bushes hadn't had any harm come to them, despite Karen's dislike of them. However, me thinking that nothing was gonna happen did not end well. I went to bed at my usual hour, around 11, but awoke to the sound of the smoke alarm around 1 in the morning. A few moments later, before I'd even had a chance to get my rope tied up and my shoes on, I saw fire trucks and a police car racing into my yard. I rushed outside and saw my garage in flames. My garage is detached from my house and thankfully, the fire department was able to get things under control so that my home did not sustain any damage. But my car and the garage with the newly installed level 2 charger inside were a complete write-off. What do you think started it? I asked one of the police officers who was in my yard. Well, it looks like it started with the car and then the fire spread, said the officer. But the car is brand new, I answered. It had all its security checks, etc. and besides, this cannot be a coincidence. What can't? Asked the officer. I explained about Karen's visit earlier in the evening and how when she had left she had told me that she would take things into her own hands. Those are serious allegations, ma'am, said the officer. Can you prove them? I'm not sure, I answered, but I do have a security system. Hopefully it can tell us because I cannot just believe that the car started on fire just like that, especially when Karen was angry that I had the charger installed just this afternoon in the garage. We headed inside the house and I turned on my computer to be able to access the feed for the security system. Would you like some coffee? I asked as I waited for the computer to load. Thank you, ma'am, said the officer. I have some pie too if you would like, I said. The officer accepted and by the time I had served us both, the camera feed was ready to be loaded. I pulled it up to the time when Karen had visited earlier in the evening. Since we had been out on my front porch, our entire conversation had been captured. Next, I found the right camera and angle for my car and the garage. I felt nauseous watching the next several minutes of the footage. It clearly showed Karen walking into my yard with a can of gasoline and dumping it on and around my car, which was parked just outside the garage. The car quickly went up in flames after Karen dropped a match on it, the fire spread to the garage and now I had no car and no garage. Even though I know what Karen had told me, I was still struggling to wrap my head around the whole situation. I couldn't easily believe that someone would destroy someone's property just like that because they were worried about it. Also, Karen had been worried that if a fire did start because of my charger, it might lead to her property and yet she would set the fire anyway. The officer took copies of my security footage and then called in another police car. From my upstairs bedroom window, I witnessed them arresting Karen. Over the next few days, there was a hearing and Karen was denied bail. The police had done some digging into Karen and had learned that there was a history of complaints against her from the neighbors because of her petty complaints and sometimes the actions she had taken because of them. But setting fire to my Tesla was the biggest offense she had committed so far. It was clearly arson and Karen was charged with it and other related offenses. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Thankfully, my insurance was able to cover the damage to my car in my garage. A new model of Tesla was on the market when I got around to buying a new car again, so I went with it and the more advanced charging system. I also installed a gate around my property so that people couldn't just walk in whenever they wanted to. This way, regardless of whether I parked the car in the driveway, because I like to be able to look out at it, or in the garage, I know that no one can just walk in and tamper with it. By the way, Karen's house is up for sale. I heard that it was her mom who put it on the market since Karen won't be able to make the mortgage payments while she is behind bars. I just hope that the new neighborhood minds their own business and doesn't care what the rest of us neighbors do. After all, we should all be free to live without the stress of harassment. And yeah guys, I would say amen to that. I really feel for everyone who has awful neighbors like that. Either way, the next one is a super funny Am I the Jerk story that is titled Am I the A-hole for making a customer who always pays in loose change count out every penny before getting his pizza? And by the way, if you enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. So I have been delivering pizzas part-time at Marco's Pizza for about 2 years now to help make ends meet. Most customers are pretty normal, they pay with card, have cash ready, or at least apologize if they need to run back inside to grab money. But then there's this one customer, his name is John, who's become infamous among all the drivers for his so-called special payment method. See, John does not just pay in change, he pays in the most inconvenient way possible. We are talking about $20 worth of pizza being paid for entirely in nickel, dimes and pennies, all mixed together in this massive canvas bag that probably weighs 3 or 4 pounds. The thing is, he knows exactly what he's doing. Every time he answers the door, he's got this smug little smirk on his face as he holds out that bag of coins. Most drivers just take the bag and leave because it's not even worth the hassle of counting it all. Usually the amount is pretty close to correct, maybe a few cents over, but it's the principle of the thing, you know. This guy is clearly getting some kind of weird satisfaction from making our jobs harder. I had managed to avoid delivering to his house for a few months because everyone at work knows his address by heart. It is 1847 Sycamore Drive, and whenever his order comes in, it's like a game of hot potato with the delivery tickets. Nobody wants to be stuck around with it. Last Friday, I was having a particularly rough night. 3 customers had stiffed me on tips, I got caught in a downpour, and some teenager gave me fake bills that I had to pay back to the store out of my own pocket. Then I saw the next delivery ticket. It said 1847 Sycamore, John's house. That is when I remembered a post I'd seen about someone dealing with a similar situation at a checkout counter. A light bulb went off in my head. I grabbed his order, 1 large pepperoni and a 2 liter of Sprite, 1947 with tax, and headed to his house. But this time I had a plan. I pulled up to his house and left the pizza in my car. Walking up to his door empty-handed, I rang the bell, and sure enough there was John, early 50s, polo shirt tucked into khakis, holding his signature canvas bag of coins with that irritating smirk. "Evening," he said, jangling the bag. "Got my pizza?" I smiled pleasantly and said, "Of course, sir, but we have a new policy that I need to tell you about. Due to some recent issues with incorrect payments, we need to count all cash and coin payments before handing over the order." His smirk faltered slightly. "What? Just take the bag. It's all there. Maybe even a little extra." I maintained my professional tone and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but policy is policy. We will need to count it out right here. Would you mind turning on your porch light? It is a bit dark to count coins." He looked annoyed but flicked on the porch light. "Fine, let's get this over with." I sat down right there on his porch and dumped out the bag of coins. "Let's see, that's 1 nickel, 2 nickels. I started counting methodically, making neat little stacks of 10 coins each. "Are you serious right now?" John demanded. "You're really gonna count every single coin?" "Just following policy, sir," I replied cheerfully. 3 nickels, 4 nickels. He stood there awkwardly, shifting from foot to foot. "This is ridiculous. Can't you just take the bag like everyone else does?" 5 nickels. "Sorry, sir, but I could lose my job if I don't follow the new policies." 6 nickels. A few minutes passed. His neighbors across the street were watching with interest from their window. John was getting increasingly agitated and said, "Look, just bring me my pizza. I promise there's enough there." 7 nickels. "I will get your order as soon as we've confirmed the correct amount, sir." 8 nickels. "For Christ's sake," he exploded. "This is harassment." I looked up innocently and said, "Sir, you're the one who chose to pay in loose change. I'm just making sure the amount is correct." 9 nickels. After about 10 minutes of this, I had neat stacks of coins arranged on his porch. Okay, let's see. We have $4.35 in nickels, $8.90 in dimes, and $6.37 in pennies. That comes to $19.62. Would you like your 15 cents change? His face was bright red by this point. Just keep it," he muttered. "Are you sure? The new policy says I need to provide exact change." "Keep it," he snapped. "Just get me my damn pizza." I retrieved his order from my car and handed it over. "Here you go, sir. Thank you for your patience with our new policy. Have a great night." He snatched the pizza and slammed the door without another word. The best part? Word got around the neighborhood about what happened. Apparently the neighbors who watched the whole thing thought it was hilarious and shared the story at their block party that weekend. John has ordered pizza 4 times since then, always paying by card. But here's where I might be the a-hole. Some of my coworkers think I went too far. They say I was needlessly antagonistic and could have just taken the bag like everyone else does. My manager actually thought it was funny but suggested I shouldn't do it again as it took me off rotation for other deliveries for too long. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for making this guy count out his payment penny by penny? And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments, but I would say OP was definitely not the a-hole douchebag douchebags like this guy definitely need to be taught a lesson, and OP basically did God's work here. To answer some questions, yes, it really took about 15 minutes total, and no, there's not actually a new policy, and yes, he has ordered since then using a credit card every time, and our store technically has a right to refuse service policy, but management never enforced it with him. Comment number 1, soft, you are the a-hole, but I love it. Sometimes being an a-hole is justified, and this was definitely one of those times. You were not even really an a-hole, you were just following policy. Comment number 2, you are the a-hole. Look, I get that the guy was being annoying with his change payments, but you went way overboard. You essentially held his food hostage while putting on a show for the neighbors. What if he had kids waiting for dinner? What if the pizza got cold? You had no right to make up a fake policy just to be petty. If the change payments were such an issue, your manager should have addressed it officially with the customer or refused service. Instead, you chose to be passive-aggressive and waste everyone's time. Part of working in customer service means dealing with difficult people professionally. You failed at that. Just because someone is being a jerk does not give you the right to be an even bigger one. You potentially risked your job and the store's reputation just to prove a point. And yeah guys, I 100% disagree with this comment. This person is basically saying, if you work in customer service, you need to take abuse and not do anything against it. I would say the a-hole in this case is the person that wrote that comment. Either way, comment number 3, not the a-hole, former pizza delivery driver here, we had a guy like this too, and I wish I had thought of your solution. Also, the fact that he's now paying by card proves that he was just being difficult on purpose before. Either way, the next one is a pro-revenge story. A few years ago, I used to work overnight, 11 PM to 7 AM, for an insurance company. I did roadside service, which consisted of people calling in about a flat tire, dead battery, or in this case, keys locked in the car. I would then call and pay a contracted company to go out and help. So around 3 AM my time, a woman calls in from Phoenix for help. She is locked out of her car. She started the call off very impatient and belligerent. First off, she was slurring heavily, so I was having a hard time getting her address, which I guess was my fault. I had to have her repeat the city a few times, since I genuinely couldn't understand her. She hated this and began mocking me and implying I was not from the country, which in fact I was. Apparently, my southern accent did not allude to that. Anyway, once I got the address, I asked what the address was for a reference for the locksmith. House, store, gas station, etc. She said it was a house. I looked it up in Google Maps and it was, in fact, a dive bar. Put her on hold to call the locksmith. Once I got back over, she continued to be generally displeased and angry at me personally. It would take 45 minutes for the locksmith to get there, which is actually a decent time, especially past midnight. But well, it was my fault that she had to wait for her keys. Whatever. I hung up with her and googled the local police. I then called them and reported her for potential DUI, mostly because she pissed me off. Sure enough, about 45 minutes the locksmith called back, saying that he could not perform the service. I could hear yelling in the background. Apparently the woman began fighting with the police when they arrived and was being arrested by the time the driver showed up. Her boyfriend/husband, who the driver said seemed sober, was trying to talk them out of it. So it turns out she did have a DD, but her drunken anger made her start fighting the police that showed up. Be nice to call center employees. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I own a shop on my town's main street, which my guess is similar to a lot of streets bearing that name. A few restaurants, a bank, shops, nothing big and corporate really, so the store owners are a little bit of a tight-knit group. In total, there are about 30 stores on the street. All of us have windows brandishing the Little League teams we sponsor and items to entice people to come in. My shop has the unfortunate pleasure of being at the end of the street, which then turns into residential housing. The woman who owns the house hates me for things that I have zero control over. When parking on the street is too busy, people tend to go around the corner and park in front of people's homes. Legally, I might add. I have her coming into my shop every time she catches somebody parking and entering to yell at me and my potential customers. I've tried kicking her out, I've tried banning her, all it causes is her to stalk the store until I leave to yell at me on the public street. One day I was sick of her crap and told her in some very choice words that I will not repeat her to go away and never come back. That she had to leave me alone because if she made me angry enough, I was gonna turn into a person that did things one would not like happening to them. And well, it turns out that while Karen can dish out, she is totally incapable of taking it. All the things she was doing were perfectly fine, but I snapped back and suddenly I was an evil and horrible person. As such, she wanted to get revenge on me and, in her own words, ruin my business and cause me to go bankrupt. I did not know how she planned on doing that exactly, but my guess was she was going to do a classic Karen move. AKA a complaint on the internet, try to protest against me, etc. However, what I did not expect this woman to get a semi-truck and park it so that she was blocking my entire business from street view. Nobody could see my store unless they were walking down the sidewalk or knew it was there. This is not the kind of store people plan to go to. It relies on people seeing and thinking it is cool. For anybody curious, I sell various memorabilia, so my stock varies greatly. A lot of my customers are people coming in to see what I have after noticing my sign. Karen was stopping that, and I wanted to find a way to make that truck go away. At first, I assumed it must not be legal to park a truck like that on the street. It turns out that as long as it was parked legally and she paid the meter for all spots it was occupying, there were no problems with it. I knew that something would go wrong soon because of how tight the space was. It only took 2 days before her truck couldn't fit due to another car being in one of the spots. To make her truck fit, she put it partially up on the frickin' sidewalk, thinking I would not do anything against it. I called the police and told them there was a semi-truck on a public sidewalk, creating a dangerous hazard. They came and had to get a special tow truck in order to remove something that big and get it away. This is where things get really interesting, because even if I was not the one to get it towed, Karen would blame me anyway. She came into my store, and before I could remind her she was banned and threatened to call the police, she started grabbing everything she could and breaking as much of my merchandise as possible. She was screaming like a banshee, saying that her truck got stolen and that she would file charges against me for Grand Theft Auto. She was literally calling the police on me, which was absolutely bizarre considering the crimes she committed. I went to physically stop her while telling my employee to call the police instead. Let's see who believes who, Karen. They came and saw the mess that she created and how crazy she was. She was arrested on the spot for trespassing, since she was banned from my store, and of course destruction of property. I had to create a list of everything she broke and what it was worth. For getting the money, I had to have a different kind of court and trial than she would for the actual criminal offenses. Don't think that the truck was not gonna come back and bite her in the ass though. It turns out her criminal charges were just getting started and quickly racking up. On the way to the station, she was charged with resisting arrest. Once the truck was traced to her, she had charges relating to not having the right license to drive the truck and it not being registered. Despite it not being criminal and just a fine to the town, I think this last one is the most ironic. While people trying to shop can park in the residential area, it doesn't work the other way around. You cannot leave your car in the shopping area and then go to residential. You need to actually be using the shopping area if you want to park there. Her main complaint she was having was something she was now getting in trouble for doing, basically. I totaled up everything she broke and took her to court for the $12,000 of things she destroyed. Of course, she didn't want to give up without a fight on her end, trying to argue that I was just making up prices because I knew all my stuff was garbage. I came prepared with proof of what they were worth and all the authentication I needed. When she was ordered to pay me, she actually told the judge that she didn't need to do anything she didn't want to because this was America. The judge told her that yes, it was America, and if she didn't follow a court order to pay me, then in 40 days her assets could be seized and they would make her pay me. Luckily, she didn't wait and let that happen and instead paid me. I think her lawyer told her it would seem better when she went for her criminal trial, in which she had zero remorse for what she had done. She even told them that as soon as she got another truck, she would park it to block my business again. As for resisting arrest, she once again went the America route of thinking she had the right to do anything she wanted and could refuse to be arrested. Since the charges had nothing too serious, she was not going to jail. 5 years probation and I was given a restraining order for her. She could not come near my business or I could call the police. Now, I knew she was still watching my store from afar and I wanted to do something to honestly just be a jerk. I managed to find some semi-truck memorabilia that was related to a sports event giveaway. I put it front and center at the window for everybody, including Karen, to see. Immature? Yes. Worth it? Absolutely. And yeah, ripe stars, if you enjoyed this story of Karen getting her sort of, I would say, comeuppance, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously in regards to pleasing the algorithm. Either way, the next one is a malicious compliance story. It was 2005 and the lady I had met over the internet, having visited me in Australia and me visiting her in the US and meeting her folks and all that, she had now come to be with me and we had married. But since arriving to stay, she had a lot of problems as her vocational college degree was not recognized in Australia, leaving her with difficulties getting a job. She was determined and flexible though, and did some temporary jobs, clerical receptionist kind of things, using skills she had learned while working at college as a librarian. She finally got a real job as a receptionist or a clerk at a company that brokered loans, and she got on with things. One thing that was always a problem was that the sales rep/sharks would have their clients come in and they would tell the women to make coffee for them. That was not the part of their role, so my wife and co-workers were told that they were not to do that. It was up to the salesperson to make the coffee for themselves and the clients. This was part of an initiative to try to retain women in these roles, as they did not tend to stay long in what was something of an anarchic office. So my wife is working, and a salesman, they called them financial advisors, but they were the credit business version of the used car salesman class. Client comes in and she busts the guy. He comes out and says to her to make them both coffees. She tried to be discreet but said that he knew that she couldn't do that. He blew up, went to her supervisor, and she told my wife to make the coffee. Later, she had her in the office and then fired her. Yep, she was fired for trying to do as she was told, the opposite of malicious, I guess. But the karma comes in anyway. She was fired but asked to stay on until they got another person to replace her. For the next 2 months, she continued to go to work, now able and ready to refuse anything she didn't want to do, especially the coffee making. The same guy tried once, she said no, so fire me. They could not find a replacement for her. Word of their issues at that company had got around the receptionist/clerical field locally. Edit, she reminded me the agency she had got the job through refused to send anyone. It was the third person in a row dumped when the probationary period was nearly up, so the agency was not being paid their commission. Then she was offered a much better job with some real responsibility and standing and almost 30% more salary, walked in the office next day and told them she was leaving at the end of the day. No notice required, of course, and they still had not gotten a replacement and did not find one for months more, by which time they were trying to replace 2 of them. Eventually, the company let the woman supervisor go and initiated sensible rules. My wife never looked back, but we still have a chuckle 18 years later at how well getting fired worked out for her and how badly it ended for the supervisor who fired her staff for obeying the rules. And the next one is a funny little petty revenge story to end the video, and it is titled "Gave a coworker's address to a law firm he was running from." So this was a few years ago. A guy at work made me mad. I had overheard him talking crap about me. I went looking for info about him online. I found a car repo negative balance lawsuit for $5,000-ish on a county court site. I found the law firm and used the Contact Us page and referenced their own case number with his new address and phone number. He started delivering pizzas on the site shortly thereafter. And then a user in the comments suggested, for true continued pettiness, make sure you order a pizza when he's doing the deliveries and don't tip him. And then another person said, better yet, order a pizza to be delivered to the law firm. And yeah guys, thanks a lot for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.